But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Greetings, fragile yet toxic males and self-hating and stupid females, and welcome to HBR News number 135. Richard Dreyfuss says yes all men in response to allegations against him. With the polecats, those critters that ferret out the best feels, funnies, and what the fucks to discuss Slam Bam Badger style. Mind your spines for the cringe, hold on to your sides for the lulls, and keep your chemo at the ready for this cancer. Today's polecat panel consists of Max Darrett, Simpsonskin, and definitely not Jerry Gord of the VeggieTales. I'm running out of characters. If anybody knows of any other yellow characters that I haven't done yet, just tweet it at me at Xanamaru. Our polecat punster and pussycat punisher Hannah, Dr. Random Cam, Evil Panda, Puppet Master, and Rabid Long Range Rhetorician. Rhetorician? Yeah, that's it. And me, Supreme Doge in charge, who has reached the end of his journey through the self-poisoning process, only to be dragged back down by doing this fucking show. And by the way, my last name is Martinez, so that you guys can't accuse me of being racist. Today we'll be discussing the following topics. As the veil of Hollywood hypocrisy is being lifted and a tidal wave of allegations come out, award-winning actor Richard Dreyfuss has joined the club of stars accused of sexual harassment. His response? All men everywhere are to blame for his actions. He should have just come out as gay. Or maybe blame some Russian bots. It's been a year since President Trump won the US election in 2016, and the lulls and keks have not shown any sign of letting up. While my feelings on Trump's presidential performance are somewhat positive, but I have some criticisms, I must admit the greatest gift of all has come in the form of the reactions from feminists and SJWs in the media. This is actually a bit of an interesting case study in how feminists can try to find ways to connect the current administration to men in general. And this next piece that we're looking at is no exception, although it is exceptionally cancerous. The ICMI 2018 is coming around the corner, and it will be here before you know it. The venue has changed, however, and we will be giving you the details on whens, hows, wheres, and whys of all of this that's been coming out. If you have Netflix but haven't canceled your subscription yet because you want to watch The Punisher first, then you're like me, and you probably gave Stranger Things a watch because you needed to justify the $10 a month that you were spending on the subscription fee. Stranger Things, in case you don't know, is that series that's a throwback to 80s film and culture, clearly made by people who only know of this era by watching 80s movies and YouTube videos of 80s TV commercials, but haven't actually lived in the 80s. But BuzzFeed writer Allison Wilmore has been able to glean something deeper from the show. Nerds weren't always as toxic as they are now, and also we're all nerds. Cuphead, the Fleischer-esque animated side-scrolling shooter, which should win an award for most mushroom and DMT-induced boss designs in any game ever, has been breaking a lot of other records and getting a lot of accolades, except for the one that I just nominated it for. It's also been getting a lot of hate for its difficulty and its exclusionary get-good attitude. Hate from, get this, professional games journalists. I know, it's a shock. But there is something else that unwinnable writer Yusuf Cole needs us to be aware of. And that is the problematic roots of its animation style. Because, you know, when you draw something in a style reminiscent in the 1930s, it means you share the fucking beliefs of the worst actors in the 1930s as well.
Oh man, shut the fuck... Sorry.
And finally, our bonus stories for the patron-only after show. It's going to be another double feature, folks. Say it ain't so. Hey, men. Have you ever told a woman that they're being hysterical or overreacting when they are being hysterical or when they're overreacting? Well, you know that's sexist gaslighting, right? So have you ever tried instead to choose to engage in self-deprecation and told a woman that you were being an asshole in an effort to take responsibility for maybe if you were being an asshole? Surprise! That's also sexist and manipulative because of Jezebel. Secondly, X-Men 3 actress Ellen Page decided to write a long and dramatic Facebook post about X3 director Brett Ratner, which reads like something she probably should have shared with her therapist instead of the entire world. But hey, what else is a narcissist to do? We'll be reading her post because it's clearly what Miss Page wants. Also, if Brett Ratner's going to be held accountable for anything, it should be making X3. But anyway, if you'd like to participate in our after shows either as an audience member or a participant, please consider becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. If you don't want to wake up one morning and find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the guillotine on our channels, go to badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com. You should see it at the top of your screen. That is where you'll find all of our shit. And also the useful stuff we make. We're going to be moving to a digest format for podcasting, so if you're listening to this in audio format and still want to follow our uncut live streams, you will also be able to find those at badgerfeed.com. So, with all of that out of the way, I guess we'll go into the stories. And to start, I'm going to hand this over to my yellow brother from another mother, Max Darrett.
You can't be yellow. You'll never be yellow.
Actually, you know, Shibas are kind of yellow.
Oh. Well, I mean, just get some spray paint like I told you to. All you have to do is plug your nose while you're doing it, man.
This is natural.
It's okay. I won't tell anybody. Anyways, just so you guys know, I watched Gone with the Wind last week. De facto, I'm a racist. Quick question for Brian, Mike, and all the men in the chat. Specifically the men. Is it ever okay to do anything sexual with a woman without her consent?
No. But it's also apparently not okay to do it with their consent, even if they let you do it.
Mike?
I'm taking the fifth. I'm taking the fifth all the way home, baby. All the way up there. I'm taking it.
Ladies and gentlemen, take his fifth pleading as you will. Well, in response to that, to Mike and Brian and the rest of the chat, shut your whore mouths and stop lying. This is a part of the script. It worked a whole lot better in my head, you know. In case you guys don't know, I'm reading from a script when I'm doing my intros. Anyways, famous actor Richard Dreyfuss, the guy from Piranha, I believe,
and Jaws.
Oh yeah, of course, duh. Is the latest to be accused those fish movies is the latest to be accused of sexual harassment. Although he denies the accusation, he took the opportunity to say that in the 1980s he was an quote-unquote asshole, the kind of performative masculine man his father had modeled for him to be. What exactly did he do that was wrong? He apparently was a relentless flirt. The following is a quote from him that came out alongside the initial accusations. I flirted with all women, be they actresses, producers, 88-year-old grandmothers, or midgets. I'm just adding in the midgets thing there.
He probably did, though.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, he might have that sort of fetish. He looks like that kind of guy. I even flirted with those who are out of bounds, like the wives of some of my best friends, which especially revolts me. I disrespected myself, and I disrespected them, and ignored my own ethics, which I regret more deeply than I can express. During those years, I was swept up in this world of celebrity and drugs, which are not excuses, just truths. Since then, I've had to redefine what it means to be a man, and an ethical man. I think every man on earth has or will have to grapple with this question, but I am not an assaulter. Now let's assume the worst and say that the type of flirting Dreyfuss did cross the line in some way. Is this a problem that's endemic to all men, as it seems like he's alluding to, although not necessarily, because I couldn't really deduce that from the article itself? Or is this Hollywood? Everybody say the correct answer with me. Hollywood.
Hollywood.
The correct answer. Hollywood.
Actually, I'm going to disagree with all three of you. The correct answer is neither.
Oh.
Because I would bet you that there are men in Hollywood, plenty of men in Hollywood, who don't engage in any kind of misconduct.
Yeah.
So it's not even there might have been an environment in Hollywood where it was, more sexually charged. I would almost expect that in a situation, in a performing arts situation. Having been in performing arts situations myself, that's pretty typical. And as far as Dreyfuss goes, and I will say right now that never in my entire life did my combination of dyslexia and habit of skimming over text or anything ever lead me to read his name, Richard Dreyfuss. Didn't happen. But anyway, no, I know guys that are habitual flirts. They are some of the most fun guys to be around, as long as they're harmless flirts that just everything is a flirty jab, and there's no crossing the line. There's no, if you've set a boundary, it's not going to get crossed, and you know what his boundaries are because he'll tell you I'm joking, if you try to cross a boundary or anything like that. So if that's the guy that he's saying that he was, and then he's saying it's something bad, to me, that's the damage right there. And among other things, like it's not harmless, first of all, or it's not harmful to flirt, just flirt. People do that all the time. It's how you get to know people. It's how you get together. Obviously, it's really stupid to treat harmless flirting as the same way that you would treat sexual harassment.
Exactly. And just quickly, sorry to interrupt you, Hannah, but just a good example is like if you're dating a girl and you take your girlfriend home to meet your parents, and the girlfriend says to your father, "Oh, I see where so-and-so gets his good looks from." That's flirting.
Yeah, that's
is that
flirting.
terrible?
Yeah.
No.
Or when you go to the girl's house,
she's not trying to get with him.
Yeah. Or when you go to the
She just
girl's
is
house
being nice.
and you see the mom and you say, "Oh, is your sister home?" Like that.
Yeah.
It's the same idea. Yeah.
It was so nice to meet your sister. Having the gift of
Straight men
belonging.
flirt with each other all the time as well. Like the funniest thing straight guys can do with each other now is flirt with each other and go as far as possible because it's funny. And I think we do that largely because we're not allowed to do it with women anymore to anything like the degree we could be allowed to. I don't know.
Yeah. And that's like, so I hate to see, and honestly, Richard Dreyfuss has one of those ornery faces, right? That you kind of expect this guy to flirt. Just looking at him, you expect him to be a flirt, and that might be sexist, but he does. He has the ornery, flirty, innocent guy face. And you can't call it boyish because it's not boyish. It's just that he always looks amused. I bet if he gets angry, he still will look amused. And that's going to lead women to flirt with him, even when he's old. And I know that because I worked at nursing homes, and I know how the older men that had that type of face interacted with the women and how the women there interacted with them. And the little old ladies would just die over those guys, not literally, obviously, but they'd always be, going around flirting with those guys. And the nurses' aides were different to those guys than they were to a lot of other guys in the nursing homes. And it's that way from childhood on up. The little girls are more likely to flirt with the guy that always looks vaguely amused. And it's just the way it is. And so, of course, they're more likely to learn to grow up learning to flirt. And I hate seeing this. I hate this probably because I've always been a massive flirt, and it's probably mostly been accidental. But there's quite a bit of times when it's deliberate too. I will acknowledge that. But I mean, it bugs me that it's always been okay for me. Nobody's ever been like, "Oh, you're such a horrible person." Well, there've been girls that have gotten mad at me for flirting with guys. But I mean, nobody's ever said I was insidious and evil and dangerous and that kind of, toxic or anything like that for it. And it would just, the damage that would do emotionally to a guy, that just hurts to think about. That's cruel and rotten, and it's unfair. If we can do it and they can't, that's just unfair. Especially when the guys are the ones who have the responsibility, at least the social responsibility, to initiate contact and initiate relationships, initiate dating situations, and so on. How are they supposed to do that if they're not allowed to flirt? How dry and boring do you really want your dating life to be? Now, all of that said, if he's lying and he did do the things that he's accused of, that's shitty too. But I have a feeling he's not. Well, and I have a feeling that the woman that complained about him didn't feel like her complaints were legitimate and exaggerated in order to make them seem legitimate.
If Richard Dreyfuss is being a piece of shit in the 80s, does a woman call that a close encounter of the turd kind?
I would say so.
All right, but seriously though, I want to echo what you guys are saying. You know, in terms of, I don't believe that it's all of Hollywood. I think that a lot of the stuff that's coming out is allegations, and don't forget that what you're hearing, there's a lot of conflating going on. Like there are accusations of rape, there are accusations of sexual assault, then there are accusations of sexual harassment, then there are accusations of things that are actually consented on, you know, like what was with Louis C.K., where he asks women if this is what they want and they say yes. So there's a conflation of all kinds of shit going on, and it just looks like all of it's coming out and it's the same, but you have to look at each individual thing. So in this particular case, Dreyfuss is being accused of sexual assault, and then he confesses to flirting with women in the 80s. And I can tell you that it's actually probably a very, very short trip if you're the kind of woman that wants to play the victim, that wants to, you know, see things in this way, to see flirting, even if it's completely harmless, because he says he does it with 80-year-old grandmothers. I mean, you know, that's obviously harmless. To see that as sexual harassment, all it takes is for you to decide to interpret it as sexual harassment. And then it is. And then when by him saying, well, yeah, I flirted with people in the 80s and I feel bad about it, it's sort of like him saying, I admit that that's sexual harassment. Instead of standing by it and saying, well, look, I had no intention of harming anyone with this stuff. You know? So I think that it's just important to, like, understand the differences on a case-by-case basis when these things come out. And of course, there's the possibility that in the cases that aren't proven to be true, that none of them are true. I mean, it's possible. It's likely that some of it's true and some of it isn't, but you know, you have to bear that in mind, that there's no evidence, and it's just a bunch of people all coming out of the woodwork, pointing fingers at other people, saying they did this 20 years ago, this guy did this 30 years ago, this guy did this 15 years ago, whatever. And then those people saying, I don't remember that because I was probably stoned, on drugs, drunk, or it's just a long time ago and I'm senile or whatever, but I'm sure that I'm no angel. And then people are like, oh, he's admitting to it, but it's like, it's been so long, it's impossible to know. The thing that I am annoyed with here is when Dreyfuss says, during those years, I was swept up in a world of celebrity and drugs, which are not excuses, just truths. Since then, I've had to redefine what it means to be a man and an ethical man. I think every man on earth has or will have to grapple with this question. And I think that's the part where the writer thinks that he is blaming men everywhere for Hollywood's sex problem. And I think that to an extent there is a bit of deflection going on here, where he first says, my situation is specific and unique in that I am a celebrity and I was in the world of drugs and celebrity. But then says all men on earth have to grapple with this question of being what it means to be a man and what it means to be an ethical man. And I think there's a little bit of him saying, well, a part of me can't help it because I'm a man, but that's not true. I don't agree with that, but I do think that's where he's going. It's hard to know for sure because obviously they didn't get him to say on record, are you saying this about men? But I think it's fair to sort of get that from this statement when he says, I think every man on earth has or will have to grapple with this question. I don't think it's a full out deflection per se, but I do think that there's a little bit of maybe he's dodging some responsibility and saying, well, I was young and immature and I didn't know what it was to be a man, and now I do. And I think that, you know, I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean that all men by their nature are flirtatious pieces of shit? Because I don't think that that's an accurate assessment. Do you see what I'm saying? So I guess that's the bit that I take issue with.
Oh, I definitely agree. You can't generalize anything to all men. You can't necessarily say you got to reevaluate all of manhood or all of masculinity because you get called on something.
However,
but
real quick. However, one other thing: if his whole life has been the culture of Hollywood, then maybe he sees more of that with the people he ran with. I wouldn't say Hollywood in general, but maybe like his circle. His social circle within Hollywood, he saw a lot of that there, and then maybe thought that was normal. When regular, people outside of the celebrity, entertainment industry that are just going about their business are nothing like that because they don't have that kind of excess and luxury and disposable income and all of that. So that's possible.
Well, and I would also, I would still go back to, I'm sure that just like outside of Hollywood, there are different circles of association within the profession, the whole spectrum of professions that take place in Hollywood. And I'm sure that there are people that engage in a more vice-oriented lifestyle with drinking and drugs and free love and all of that. And there are conservatives in Hollywood, and there are probably traditionalists in Hollywood, and there are probably people in Hollywood that are more personally conservative, not in terms of the political conservative end of the political spectrum, but actually conservative in their decision making, conservative in their choices, as in they don't necessarily live in excess in anything, and I'm just from personal experience with being involved with politics, you see that in politics as well. You go to a political convention, there are people that will go to the talks in the convention, and they'll go and they'll look at the displays and they'll take notes and write things, especially like a cities and villages convention where you have mayors and city councilmen, and you might have county commissioners there as well, and everything. You have a divide between the people that just go there for professional reasons to learn and gather information for their communities, and then there's the people that go there to party, and they'll behave entirely differently, and you can see they don't really spend a lot of time together with each from the other group. Even if they've gone there with other members of their own council or their own county commission and so on that are doing the opposite thing that they're doing, you won't see them together most of the time. And that's just the way people are. You have, it's almost like high school, where you have the party clique and you have the nerd clique and you have the sports clique and you have the preppy clique, and they do their thing. And you won't necessarily see the nerds and the preps at some party. They might not even get invited. But if they were there, they won't be the ones that are dancing on tables and drunk out of their gourd and, passing out and all that stuff. They'll be the ones that are standing around chit-chatting and maybe dancing if there's music and that kind of thing. You see that throughout life with people. So I don't like generalizing this to anything. There are going to be cliques where that's normal, and there are going to be cliques where that's not normal. And I'm sure, if Mr. Dreyfuss had that kind of a lifestyle where, he had all these excesses and there was all of the vices being pursued and everything, it was as part of a clique, not so much something that you could say, well, he did this because he was a guy, or he did this because it was Hollywood, but he did this because the circle of associates that he hung out with, that was their lifestyle.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. I mean, I don't want to, paint Hollywood with a broad brush here. It doesn't look good, but and the thing is too, is that a lot of times, and again, it's hard to know what the actual truth of it is, but like conservative actors in Hollywood usually get pushed out, or they don't find much work at least the ones that have spoken out, which is why I say, you know, it's hard to know for sure, because there could be a lot of other ones that are doing fine, or they're not, they're in the closet, as it were, about their politics, and so because they want to keep getting work. But I do know that there are people who get pushed out for their beliefs if they don't toe the line, and it does happen. It's just hard to know like how bad the problem is. So with that said, it's difficult to know what goes on, you know, in Tinseltown. But when I see I guess to just sort of nail it down, where I disagree with Mr. Dreyfuss, despite whatever might be going on with his personal allegations, is that, one, I don't think that flirting is harassment, depending on how you do it, I suppose. But I think that that's just like a really blurry line that's difficult to define. So I'm just saying, in general, if it's harmless flirting, it's not harassment. And he doesn't need to apologize for that, especially if it's something that happened so long ago. And then the other thing is that any issues that you may have, like anything that you may have done, any failings that you believe that you have as a result, are not things that all men deal with, but maybe things that men like yourself and maybe men that you know have dealt with, and that might be why there is this generalization. Because a lot of times when feminists and social justice warriors argue, their number one weapon is often anecdotal evidence, where they say, in my personal life, or the people I know, or people I've spoken to, blah, blah, blah. And that therefore proves the truth about something. So I see that as a pattern that is very, very common. And I think that a lot of the, you know, what seems to be the case is that people, when they're talking about where their beliefs come from, it comes from their anecdotal evidence. But it does not, and they're usually not prepared for a larger, you know, sample size, or maybe an argument that says, you know, your exception does not disprove the rule, or here's some evidence that shows the opposite of what you believe, or whatever, because it sort of shatters, you know, what they believe in, which is essentially their experience is the normal experience, especially because it coincides with what they want to believe about the world outside of their bubble. But it doesn't fit in, and I see that as a normal tactic or approach. And so when I read this, you know, this article, and a lot of other Hollywood people who have said, you know, made similar cases where they say the problem isn't, you know, the problem isn't Hollywood, it's just men everywhere. The problem isn't toxic masculinity, it's just masculinity. The problem isn't this, because, you know, I know you're coming after me because for what I did. But the fact is, I'm not the problem. I'm a symptom of a larger societal abstract issue that essentially makes me less of the focus. And yeah, I mean, I take issue with those things. So I think that that's avoiding responsibility to some extent, if not completely. So. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I don't know if somebody's like trying to talk or whatever, but if there's nothing else, we'll go on to the next story.
Just one quick thing in respect to what Hannah said it before about being a relentless flirt. I just wanted to announce right now that Brian and I are going to be putting out a joint statement in the New York Times that we are the victims of harassment. And nobody out there should have to take this.
I was gonna wait until, like, you know, maybe the year 2037 to see, and then make the accusation. That was my plan. I was gonna wait until like 2037.
I don't recommend waiting too long, because, you know, a lot of people in my family don't live past their 60s. So
I can always accuse your
estate.
Yeah, your kids and the estate. By that time, we might have some laws.
You can take on my debt after I die.
Yeah. All right. Next article. Masculinity is toxic. In an article titled "The Big Picture: Confronting Manhood After Trump" for Public Books, Lisa Wade concluded that the problem is not toxic masculinity, it's that masculinity itself is toxic. What problem? Well, Trump, of course. And Wade really hates the grotesque, slobbering, thundering narcissist and his supporters, suggesting that, quote, Trump was perhaps not wrong to believe that he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and not lose voters, so long as that somebody was female, black, or brown, Muslim, or a migrant, end quote. Of course, that bit she added on, you know, because it needed a little bit of color added to the statement. Wade argues that before Trump was elected, there was use in differentiating between bad masculine ideals and good masculine ideals with the modifier of toxic. But, Wade writes, quote, we can only give masculinity so many modifiers for so long before we have to confront the possibility that it is masculinity itself that has become the problem, end quote. The misandrist weavings led us to the idea that masculinity is a social construct based on domination and being superior to others that everyone can do without. In fact, she writes, quote, we should be as suspicious of males who strongly identify as men as we are of white people who strongly identify as white. We should understand, in hindsight, that one of the reasons women were so keen to embrace masculinity in the first place was because it feels good to feel superior. And we should recognize as well that it is men's belief that they should be superior to women and other men that is the cause of so much of their rage, self-hatred, and suffering, end quote.
Sorry.
Wade concludes her ravings with a call to, quote, point masculinity out as a hazardous ideology and denounce anyone who chooses to identify with it, end quote. Masculinity is an ideology! Is it now? I thought it was a thing that men had.
Well, I think this article should be titled Projection the Article. Okay, first off, we should be as suspicious of males who strongly identify as men as we are of white people who strongly identify as white. Okay, so should we be strongly suspicious of those who proclaim that one particular thing in a spectrum of things is better than the other? Like, I don't know, somebody says that femininity is better than masculinity. Oh, and also, I love this. And we should recognize as well that it is men's belief that they should be superior to women and other men that is the cause of so much of their rage, self-hatred, and suffering. Bitch, I can guarantee you that you're the kind of woman that if you're in a room full of women and then one woman walks in that's superior than you, you're the one that's going to be the least fucking, what's the word? God damn it, I can't think.
But you know what really is interesting is that before that she says...
Rational.
Yes.
You're going to be the least fucking rational woman in that entire room. Okay.
The thing that's interesting about that is before that she says women were so keen to embrace masculinity in the first place because it feels good to feel superior. So she kind of she kind of confesses to the idea that masculinity is superior to femininity, even though that's not a thing that people generally assert. But that is something that feminists believe, because that's why they want women to be more like men, because they actually believe that men are better than women, more powerful. That's why they, and I'm sorry, I know it doesn't sound like that's what they believe, but if they believe the patriarchy oppresses women for all time, past, present, and future, in all parts of the world, everywhere, and that even though there are more women on Earth than men, even though not by a whole lot, but there's more women than men on the planet, men are still able to keep them from accomplishing anything unless women become more like men. It's the only way, right? Oh, so we have to we have to do that. And so they are the ones that believe that men are better. They're not the ones that think, first off, that people are individuals, most importantly, and that, you know, we have different traits because we're different people, but also that even if you do look at it in terms of male as a group and females as a group, women have things that they do well and men have things that they do well. And in general, right? And it's all useful. I mean, most of it's useful.
Doing your fucking biological essentialism, Brian. Jesus Christ.
Also, by the way, being suspicious of males who strongly identify as men should be seen as the same as white people who strongly identify as white. Okay. This is maybe I'm just nitpicking on her words here, but I think this is important because these people are big on distorting definitions and fucking with language, okay? A person cannot strongly identify as white. A person just is white or they're not white. There's no, I strongly identify as white. I don't care what you identify as. What are you? If you're white, then you're white. Now, I think what she's trying to say is if she's trying to draw a line to say, you know, white supremacists don't strongly identify as white. White supremacists have a strong attachment to their white identity. That's different from strongly identifying. Men, people who identify, like males who identify as men, are just men. Like most men, okay? That's just the way men work. Strongly identifying as a man, I don't know what the fuck that means. But having a strong attachment to your masculinity, okay, that might be something. Kind of like how women who have a strong attachment to their femininity, to the point where they fucking anthropomorphize everything to look like a vagina, they may have a problem. But that's not the same as a woman who recognizes that she is a woman and has no problem being feminine. That's a whole other issue. So, I'm just, looking at the words here.
This article helped me figure out why I'm an anti-feminist. I strongly identify as a vertebrate. I have a strong attachment to my spine. So, obviously, I can't be a feminist. And this social justice
if
shit.
you care about your spine, that you don't want to cringe so hard from reading articles like this. Yeah.
Like this shit. This is just absolutely... It's like somebody vomited talking points, and then they're like, oh, I can make an article out of this.
The worst part is that they cited everything. There's like citations like a motherfucker, all this. I think like 17 citations, and it's all dribble.
Yeah. But feminism is about equality, right? Not hating men, Even though all masculinity is toxic, and how dare you, as a man, identify as a man, and how dare you care about how you get treated, and how dare you care what people think of you, and how dare you do the things that it takes to be accepted socially, and how dare you listen to women when we tell you through our actions that we want you to act superior to other men, because, just because that's what we want you to do doesn't mean that you're not a bad person for doing it. I mean, how irrational can she get? It just, if this person becomes any more irrational, the universe is going to collapse in on her. It's gonna be such a senseless amount of drivel coming from this person that their entire existence is going to be affected by it. You can't have that much ridiculousness and idiocy and make it in the world. This blows my mind that this is accepted. And honestly, I think every time you get a feminist telling you that feminism is about equality and feminism is not about hating men, shoot this article at them. Tweet it to them, message it to them on Facebook, wherever you're talking to them. No, this is how feminists talk about men when they think they can get away with it. Because it's bullshit for them to not call this stuff out and not actually, they'll, if an article that said the opposite about women was published in a mainstream publication, or any publication for that matter, they'd call it out. They'd call it out as an example of misogyny. But you don't see feminists attacking this, do you? Not in large numbers, not loudly enough to get anything changed. The publication isn't going to change. So obviously they condone this. And until they start pushing against stuff like this and shutting it down themselves and saying, no, this is not what we believe, and we aren't tolerating it. And as long as they're doing that to the opposing viewpoint, or anything that they can remotely translate into the opposing viewpoint in their heads, twist it into the opposing viewpoint, then they can't honestly say that they're standing for equality. So this is something that should be shoved in the face of every feminist that says feminism is about equality, and they care about men and as much as they care about women, and they don't hate men.
This is why I chose this article. Oh, Mike, go ahead.
I just had a nightmare vision, like a sci-fi post-apocalyptic vision of the future. The census forms of the future, the application forms of the future, will have like personality tests in the place of medical information. I'll have a page where it says gender. Do you strongly agree with being male? Partially agree? Don't know. Do you strongly agree with being female? Partially agree. Do you strongly agree with being demigender? strongly agree. There's like 5 pages of those, and then do you strongly disagree with being white? Do you partially disagree with being white? There's a whole 5 pages of those. And there's like 1 page at the end where it says, "Please describe your political leanings." There's a box saying "intersectional feminists."
Do you strongly agree with breathing? Yes, I strongly agree with breathing.
I have to check somewhat agree on that one. I'm sorry. At least until I get done with. I would think I would be done with the allergy attack now. It's been frosty twice now. There should be no more pollen. Damn it.
Shouldn't be, but it's probably just hiding in your house.
Or there's probably mold somewhere in the vicinity.
But the reason why I chose this article was I've been noticing, and maybe you know, I've been doing this for a while now, and I've been seeing a lot of articles coming out, and some of them are pretty fucking crazy, right? But I've noticed that ever since the United States election and Brexit, these anti-male things have been cranking up little by little, especially after the presidential election. Let's be real here. And it's like they're becoming bolder and bolder and bolder. Have you guys that are watching, have you noticed this? That the rhetoric of feminists and social justice warriors has become more and more outspokenly just bigoted, anti-male, anti, white, anti-whatever. Just more and more boldly.
We could have predicted all of this on the 8th of November. I think we all did. Like, what are they going to do now? Well, this gives them the perfect excuse to double and triple down on everything they believe, right? It kind of didn't matter who was elected. Mm-hmm. Because I think they would have taken this angle even if Hillary was up there, you know.
Yeah, because they would just been, what direction do we point our guns, basically, you know. But I just noticed that it's been ramping up a lot. I don't know. Would we be dealing with Antifa if Hillary won? I don't know. Or like at this scale? I suppose perhaps.
I think we would.
Yeah.
There's 2 reasons. Like, first of all, Hillary winning wouldn't have changed the laws necessarily incredibly quickly. First, for one thing, they don't move quite that fast. I mean, it was a rare thing when Obama got a lot done in his first 100 days, and when Bush Jr. got a lot done in his first 100 days, and it was partly because they had majorities in Congress, and it's actually a rare thing for there to be majorities of that size that would get things done that quickly. So, if Congress had been a different mix than it is, it might have been different. But if Hillary had won, but she'd had the Congress that Trump has, we still would have probably seen a year of not much getting done in the entire time. And the other thing is, Hillary's politics were a lot more conservative than I think Antifa would like. And I think that while a lot of them are paid protesters, that their whole goal is just to stir shit to keep people from feeling safe, voting for the opposition to the progressive end of the Democrat Party. I don't think they would have backed off with a more conservative talking Democrat in the White House. So, and then the other end of it is, if we hadn't been dealing with the paid end of Antifa, the people who joined Antifa just because they are habitual protesters, and there are an awful lot of those in the U.S., I think they would have been out protesting, and they would have looked for excuses for it, the same way that the people that joined the Occupy movement and the people that joined Black Lives Matter and the people that have protested every war that we've had during our lifetimes, because they are habitual protesters, would have been, they have been out there. So I don't think they would have gone away.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, would be, but nonetheless, like I said, I thought this was interesting, like I don't know, like a case study or something. I'm basically looking at patterns of these sort of anti-male, anti-masculinity hit pieces, or whatever you want to call them, that are coming out, and they're getting more and more radical. Like it's just.
Well,
it's insane.
I'm wondering if the more recent ones have been launched specifically because of the floodgates being broken in Hollywood in terms of accusations, with more and more accusations being made.
Well,
that
yeah, there have been
they're not.
There have been
like,
some that are specifically about the Hollywood thing, but this one,
yeah,
which is,
but
you
I
know,
mean,
go ahead.
I think that may have gotten the misandry floodgates, opened up as well. In that, here you have a readily available means of calling masculinity toxic, and there's so much of it that seems to be geared around the idea that if men are equal participants in the so-called sexual market, that suddenly they're bad guys for doing that, equal to women in their participation in the sexual market. And if women don't have an advantage over them in this so-called sexual market, that indicates that the men are predatory. And so we have to have this effort to reestablish the concept of male sexuality being something dirty and predatory, that women have to resist it in order to ensure that they get the best potential outcome.
Yeah.
And basically gatekeep. And I think that the recent shit coming out of Hollywood facilitated that. And if you notice, a lot of the toxic masculinity articles, even if they don't reference the Hollywood shit, they're still basically trying that same story.
Oh, yeah.
It's all based on that calling male sexuality itself toxic one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, they also do it when there's a shooting too. For the last couple of shootings, they've been doing it too.
They do. But there's also that narrative as well. You have the male violence narrative being ramped up specifically because every incident of violence right now that happens is being reported on, and it's all being associated with their talking points. So, and we've had a couple of incidents in the last couple of years that have been particularly bad. But like, as opposed to, the other ones that are bad, but they're not, the numbers are not so high, or the situation is not so out there. But they're relating that to men because it's convenient. They have this convenient narrative, and that the masculine violence thing is being ramped up in other ways too. Like I've been hearing a lot of chatter on Twitter from feminists making false claims about who is more likely to abuse children, mother or father, and things like that.
Yeah.
They get very angry when you show them HHS statistics that show the opposite is true. And then they start making excuses. The worst one they make is women have more access to children. And I'm like, so what you're saying is, if parents have their kids around them more, they're going to abuse them. Because if women were better, having more access to children wouldn't increase the incidence of abuse by mothers. But the fact that it does indicates that they're not better. And we don't even know if that's the case. Because we don't have really a situation of equally shared parenting, or both parents being at home, being in the majority enough for us to know if that's true or not. But this is being ramped up. This has been something that's been ramped up probably for the last 5 or 6 years. And I've noticed, among other things, there are more incidents being reported as mass shootings that in the past would have just been labeled robbery or other things, where the shooting took place in conjunction with a crime, or somebody was running from the cops or things like that. And now they're in the news, they're calling it a mass shooting if 3 people get shot. So it's pretty much like the narrative is ramped up because they're desperate to basically plug the hole with people being more aware of these issues before that awareness sort of breaks the authoritarian hold.
Mm-hmm. For those guys who are watching the chat, I was not, and I'm not consuming soy. That was a protein bar. I was trying to get my protein up. And, yeah, so it was delicious. Anyway, and I got some super chats, so I'm going to go through those real quick. Zomara0292 gave us $2 and says, "Good night all, happy to see you." Hello, Zomara, thank you for the donation. Sfria gave us $5 and says, "I am giving a speech soon about men's rights issues. Half of my class are feminists and my professor is a woman. Any advice?" Be prepared to debate. And that's what I would say. Have your facts, be prepared to debate. And remember, you want to pass the class, so maybe, I mean, I don't know, like when I was in college, it was just a couple of years ago, and I got into some debates with my professors. They passed me, and I got A's in their class. But I think I wasn't overly combative, but we definitely disagreed, and they did not like what I had to say about feminism.
I have a recommendation as well. And the way I would go about it in a class like that is, instead of saying feminists did this, feminists did that, like I do on Twitter all the time, if you can get your ducks in a row ahead of time, and if you're going to talk about, say, the feminist history of anti-father lobbying, use names. You know, Carolyn Norton wrote the Custody of Infants Act that was the inspiration for the Tender Years Doctrine. And that influenced all of the countries that fall under English common law. And I know Karen knows the person who did the same thing in Canada. There wasn't really necessarily so much a person who did the same thing in the United States, but the United States has been influenced by English common law, well, for obvious reasons, forever, for as long as we've existed. And the same thing, you know, it's not feminists lobbied against and shut down equally shared parenting legislation. The National Organization for Women is who I would cite in the United States. And there have been organizations in Canada, there have been organizations in the UK that have done the same thing. And in doing that, it prevents them from saying, well, you just hate feminists, you just hate women. You end up with, these organizations are responsible for having lobbied actively to do these things. It's a lot harder for them to turn around and say, well, that didn't happen. It's still men's fault. Patriarchy did that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Also, guys, some of you are saying that, you know, it's like the stream is having issues. Remember, you can go to Twitch, and I have donations turned on there. So go to Twitch and test out the donations. You'll see some cool animations on the screen if you do that. So yeah, Sriya, I think that's what I would suggest. Does anyone else want to give her any advice on giving a speech about men's rights issues? You could also choose to focus on the men's issues and not the feminism. I mean, that's an option if you don't want too much confrontation. Basically, just present the issues that face men. Maybe if you need to contrast it against women's, because I know that there's going to be people saying, you know, what about the women's, or women have it worse, or whatever. But just, you know, maybe try to stay on topic in terms of saying, look, you know, I'm not interested in who has it worse. I'm interested in the fact that men are not getting attention for these issues while women are. You know, maybe present the evidence for that. And you might actually find that you will get some support. And there's also some things that not even feminists can distract from, and that is things like child custody, fatherlessness, circumcision, suicide. You're not going to get too much pushback from feminists on that. So there's some other things to consider.
And
bullet points, divide everything up into sections. It makes it easier to listen to and easier to read and easier to remember. Use slides if you have them. Slides are very handy. It gets people's attention if they can see things as well as listen to your lovely voice.
Yes.
These are things I'm considering as well, because I'm doing it for the first time on Sunday.
Sorry, could I just say one quick thing? In respect to what
go ahead, Max.
Yeah, in respect to what Brian said about the whole feminism thing, yeah, just if you're going to be giving a speech and then let's say have a Q&A after, in the speech, keep feminism out of it. And then if somebody in the audience brings up the subject, don't avoid it. Say that in respect to how men have been trying to gain notoriety, builds up awareness about how these issues affect them, feminists have sort of dampened the process forward, and then give examples of that as well. And make sure to provide numerous examples so that way they can say, oh, that's just, that woman doesn't represent feminism, blah, 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 blah. Yes, it does.
I would say if you want to get your classmates thinking, you can ask them a question and then follow it up with a second question. And the first question is, in terms of human rights, right? We understand human rights to mean human, which should mean everybody. So do they consider it prejudice or bigotry to single out a group of people and say that they are uniquely less deserving of human rights protections and human rights consideration and accommodation of their efforts to seek fulfillment of their human rights? And when your classmates say, well, of course that would be bigotry and prejudice, you ask them then, would you still consider it bigotry and prejudice if that group was men? Because there will be people in the class that their knee-jerk reaction is going to be offended when you ask if it's still bigotry and prejudice when that group is men, and they're not offended at being accused. They're not offended at the idea that men shouldn't, or should be excluded. They're offended at the idea that men shouldn't be excluded. That one might consider that men are excluded, and it could very well get a discussion going. That people might end up looking at aspects of their own attitudes that they aren't comfortable exploring. So that would be one thing. If you want to stir shit, that's a good way to do it, because it'll, like I said, it'll get them thinking. And rather than actually coming out and saying, feminists fight to exclude men from human rights considerations, if you ask if it is bigotry and prejudice to exclude men from human rights considerations, that puts the responsibility on them to make the decision. And then they have to they can't blame you for accusing them of being bigoted or prejudiced.
There you go. And I got one last, I hope that helps. Safria, just send us another message if you have any other questions. One last, or two more super chats. One by Cap Strong for $5. He says, has anyone noticed that most of these creep harassers are self-professed male feminists, or is it just me? Least more is just a rapist pedo poll. Okay, so a couple things I want to respond to. One is, remember, a lot of these creep harassers are just being accused. So yes, they are. A lot of them are male feminists, but you have to like try to determine whether or not the accusation is coming from the fact that male feminists are more likely to be predatory, which is there might be something to that, or if they're also, because of the people they tend to surround themselves with, which are feminists, if they're more likely to be accused of sexual harassment, sexual assault, or even rape because they're around people that think everything is rape. So it could be. It makes it actually more difficult, unless, of course, it's, confessed to, or, there's evidence that proves it. It's actually more difficult to determine whether or not this is actually happening, because you have people that are more likely to point the finger and say they did it. And then you have these feminist men who may also be more likely to desire or need female attention, therefore potentially make them more predatory. So you have a combination of things, so it's hard to know for sure. The second thing I need to respond to is, if by Moore you mean Michael Moore, we said last week, and because there was an article running around circulating the internet saying that he was accused of, I think, sexual misconduct with 14-year-old girls, either harassment or something. This is not true. The story is false. There is no evidence that says it's real. Nobody's reporting on it for real. So just, I know that you want that to be the case, because, or maybe you don't, I don't know. But Michael Moore is a piece of shit, but he didn't do this. At least the stories that are saying that he did it don't go anywhere. So I wouldn't even talk about Michael Moore. But as far as the other stuff goes, that's another thing to consider. You know, if you run with feminists, then you're probably more likely to be you're basically running around witch hunters. It's only a matter of time before they decide you're a witch too. And so even if you really are, but there's a chance that even if you aren't, you're more likely to be accused. I
just want to point out the Michael Moore thing originated on a site that parodies news. It's not an Onion. It wasn't The Onion, but it was another site that, like The Onion, it's all fake news stories, and it's all somewhere on the site it says it's a parody site, that none of it's actual news. But it got picked up by people that wanted it to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I can understand the temptation to see it and say, oh man, we got him, you know, because he would be one of those guys like George Takei. I can understand that. But in the case of Michael Moore, it's not true. So, yeah, somebody asked, you mean CNN? Yes, it may as well be.
Yes, no, CNN actually makes the assertion that they're not fake, even though like most of the stuff they publish is lies and half-truths.
I think the most reliable thing CNN has is the weather.
CNN is really, really good at arranging a selective look at the facts to exclude pertinent information that doesn't suit their narrative. To the degree that it's obviously ridiculous and fake. Like I think they were the first ones to run with the claim that Trump dumped his fish food first when he was in South Korea, when it was the South Korean leader that dumped his fish food first, and they just didn't play that part of the video, you know. So CNN,
and they can do they can do it on a 24-hour cycle.
Yeah. They're an unintentional parody news site, whereas the one that started the Michael Moore rumor was an intentional parody news site. It's a much more intelligent thing to intentionally parody than to unintentionally be a parody. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next story. Oh wait, I got 2 more super chats. Hoki Bukisa gives us $4.20, blaze it, and says, how does Waman desu? I don't know what that means, but I'll take it. And then Silent Mana gives us $50. Wow, thanks, Silent. And says, you guys are the only people I follow on YouTube that I support. I love you guys. Well, thank you. We love you too.
You're the man.
You are the person. You are the Zier. All right, so
I just wanted to give you guys a bit of breaking news before I just
that's right.
Dip out for 2 minutes. Apparently, Australia in a nationwide survey, countrywide survey,
continent.
Thank you, Jesus.
I don't know. I don't know if it's. I mean, I know Australia is a continent, but is it also a country?
It's both. Australia in a nation. For Christ's sake, I can't. Okay, Australia in a continent-wide survey has voted 61.6% in favor of gay marriage. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the Australian Parliament is going to vote in favor of legalizing gay marriage, but it's an interesting step forward. Just wanted to let you guys know that, and I'm dipping out for 2 minutes.
All right, cool. All right, I'm going to get into the next story. All right, ICMI 18 is forced to change venues after hit piece. The International Conference on Men's Issues has been held across 3 continents for 3 conferences, held in 2014 in Detroit, 2016 in London, and 2017 in the Gold Coast in the nation, country / continent of Australia. In 2018, Birmingham, UK, was originally supposed to play host to ICMI 18. Mike Buchanan of Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them signed a contract with the Birmingham City Football Club so that J4MB could host the ICMI 18 at St. Andrews Stadium. In October, Buchanan and party members handed out leaflets to promote the event at a soccer game, or football game for anyone who's not from the United States. Buchanan has said that there was seemingly an interest in the conference based on interactions with the fans. Unfortunately, there are larger forces at play that did not want to see another successful ICMI, especially at St. Andrews. Daniel's story especially at St. Andrews. Daniel Story published a piece on Football 365 making misleading statements about what J4MB stands for, trying to stir the pot. J4MB is Justice for Men and Boys, so you know. Also, Daniel has also shown that he is way too dense to catch on to Mike Buchanan's dry sense of humor in a promo video published for ICMI 18. Because of the story, the Birmingham City Football Club canceled the contract because Justice for Men and Boys supposedly misled the BCFC about the nature of the event. In a statement, the club spokesman said that, quote, Birmingham City FC can confirm that it has canceled a booking to host the International Conference on Men's Issues at St. Andrews, scheduled for July. After certain details concerning the organizers came to light, the club investigated further and concluded this is not something we want to be associated with. The club was misled at the time of booking, and as a result, we will conduct a thorough review of our internal processes. While Mike Buchanan has said that legally the football club doesn't have just cause of terminating the contract, based on recent announcements, it seems that Justice for Men and Boys has another plan and that ICMI 18 will potentially be held in London. In order to guarantee the event will happen, Justice for Men and Boys is seeking attendees to place a £22 deposit, which guarantees an early bird price ticket. In the event that the conference does not happen, deposits will be refunded. In order to find more information about ICMI, you can visit http://icmi.18.wordpress.com. I put a link in the show notes, so you should see it. And that's basically the piece. We just wanted you guys to know that the ICMI is still going to happen, or at least it appears to be, but they had to change venues because of a hit piece that the media put out. Surprise, surprise.
I don't know about you guys, but I've got a real strong sense of deja vu here. I mean, you guys experiencing a little deja vu here?
A little bit.
Just a little bit. bit of deja vu with the whole...
I feel like we've done this before, yes.
Yeah, and the not being able to recognize humor versus serious statements and all. Just a strong sense of deja vu.
Just another day for the foot soldiers of the patriarchy. It's so easy.
Yeah, we got all that privilege going for us there.
Absolutely. Real quick super chat here. General Jack Ripper gives us $10 and says, Doge, make Allison read this. I am Allison Tiemann, and I read this message. I will ask her to read it. I don't know. She's not on this show, but we'll see. Maybe next time she appears. Anyway, any thoughts on this?
I can pretend to be Allison.
You can do an impression.
I'm not really Allison Tiemann, but I'm reading this message anyway. Or I could say, I am Allison Tiemann. And I am Allison Tiemann. Message.
I am Allison Tiemann.
But it would be even funnier if all three of you guys did that.
Yeah, right. All right, well, anyway, so yeah, that's basically where we are with that. It's not over. Go to the link. It takes you to Voice for Men, which originally put out the news on this. Thank you, Paul. But you'll also find a link to the WordPress for the ICMI itself in the show notes on the Patreon page. So I guess if there's nothing else, I just wanted to put the information out there. Unless somebody has any other commentary, I'll just move on to the next story.
I just want to say once again, the sense of deja vu is overwhelming. And Mike Buchanan is a very, very good guy. I can't imagine anybody meeting him and then mistaking the movement for anything other than being above board. So what was published, it makes me wonder what the libel and slander and defamation type laws in the UK are like, because it just for that to have that degree of influence and everything, and it's falsehoods. I cannot imagine. Like I said, I can't imagine anybody meeting him and talking to him, and then turning around and thinking that he'd represent anything nefarious. He's an incredibly respectable person. and it just and you can, when you talk to him, you can tell exactly how respectable he is. He's a very, very above board person, and it just blows my mind that somebody met him and then read a stupid news article and actually thought, well, you know, this guy wasn't what he seemed, because that's just bull. It's absolute bull.
Absolutely.
He made a joke about pink and blue at one point. I think that's what may have driven them a bit nuts. He did a video sort of appearing in various parts of the venue, saying, here's the venue, it's Birmingham FC, it means a lot to me and stuff. And you know wandered around doing his thing. He's like you say, he's a very polite chap. He doesn't have the wettest sense of humor in the world. So when he says a joke like, pink for girls and blue for boys, just like nature intended, he says it in a way that doesn't come across as obvious sarcasm. So
yeah,
I can see how that can rub some outrage merchants the wrong sort of way. But yeah, that's what it stooped to now, making a joke about pink and blue.
I never thought I would see the day where the British couldn't sense dry humor when they saw it. That's
yeah, that's mind blowing in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, they taught me to appreciate it. I don't understand.
Yeah, like I wonder if today's generations are able to handle Monty Python, or if they don't watch it because it's misogynistic or something. God forbid they would watch Benny Hill.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just my thing is, like, you know, I come across quite frequently as an arrogant asshole. And if I was a guy, I would never get away with probably 3/4 of the stuff I say and do. But if you were to compare me to Mike Buchanan, you know, like it's a totally different ball game. And I might come across as a sleazy car salesman, especially in that comparison. You know, and I hate to sound like I'm being over flattering or anything, but this is someone that I honestly cannot. It just blows my mind that somebody met Mike Buchanan and talked to him, and then at any point later on went, "Gosh, this guy's not totally above board," because I just can't imagine getting that impression from him.
Yeah, well, they didn't have the BBC didn't have a problem doing that with Josh O'Brien. Like
I know, and that's another guy that's like,
yeah, you know, it's like the nicest
It's not
guy.
just politeness. It's not just politeness, though. It's just the way they carry themselves and how open and honest and upfront they are, and they don't hold back details. But they're not arrogant. They're very humble when they talk to you as far as, you know, this is the way things are and this is what we have in mind. This is what we want to do and everything. They're not, you know, like I said, I really am. I come across quite frequently as an arrogant asshole, and if I was a guy, I would never be able to get away with that. And these guys are like the polar opposite of that. And for them to get treated that way, it pisses me off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's shitty. That's the fucking media for you. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next story. Unless there's any other forward. So I apologize in advance to anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, because these last two stories, kind of like you'd have to be a person who's consumed some media to know what we're talking about. If not, hopefully maybe you can look at this in a broader sense. I want to try and give you some background. So this next story is about Stranger Things. We're all nerds now, but Stranger Things is about rehabilitating the nerd. Light, not show running spoilers ahead. So if you haven't watched Stranger Things and you have an interest in it, just be warned. There's some, but not really show running spoilers, but some spoilers ahead. So we're looking at a BuzzFeed article titled "Stranger Things is nostalgic for a time before nerds were toxic." The author, a BuzzFeed news reporter, Keck, claims that the season had the intention to rehabilitate the nerd, but failed to do so by having a heteronormative happy ending and a reinforcement of the nice guy gets the girl trope in the second season.
Wait. They actually That was a quote from the article that it had a heteronormative ending.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought that was a joke.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Nope. No. Okay. Wilmore writes, bringing our culture back to an understanding of nerds as underdogs that everyone can root for is no small achievement in 2017. When the concept of the nerd has become so ascendant as to barely be a meaningful identity anymore, thanks to people like you, and simultaneously so toxic that the resentful gatekeepers of nerddom who remain are more likely to be associated with doxing and death threats than with, say, the superhero movies that everyone watches. Once again, thanks to you, BuzzFeed. Between Gamergate, the annual onslaught of angry puppies determined to hijack the Hugo Awards, the James Damore memo, and the endless plethora of online rants about SJWs ruining the world, the connotations of modern-day nerdiness have more to do with persecution complexes and bullying than being socially rejected or bullied, end quote. Even though nerds are now the bullies and persecutors in Wilmore's estimate, she seems to appreciate that Stranger Things invites viewers to indulge in the sweet self-righteousness and sometimes perverse nostalgic injustice of being derided and excluded for being uncool. However, she calls the end of Season 2, especially, as encroaching cultural toxicity of the traditional gender stereotypes kind, and points to Max's, which is the new female character that was added to the cast this season, the new girl, Max's suggestion of being the non-D&D approved Zoomer of the group, being degraded by Mike, who is fake geek girling her, as an example of this toxicity. Wilmore also attempts to get into the head of the writers, assuming they had wanted to cram the character of Jonathan into the nice guy gets the girl role, while Steve, the other Nancy love interest, had a much more interesting character arc. She claims that the pigeonholing of Jonathan as the nice guy leads to less of a need to expand on character and can lead to a sense of entitlement, and that this romantic affirmation they apparently deserve after trials and tribulations is jarring. The article ends with a rather revealing sentence. Quote, Stranger Things may have set out to rehab the nerd, but it's losing sight of the fact that we're all nerds now, and that no one gets excused from having to grow up, end quote. If we are all nerds now, then who are the nerds that need rehabilitation?
Ah.
You know what?
Yeah.
Fuck BuzzFeed.
I know.
Right up the ass with a chainsaw.
With no lube.
Really? Like,
Nope.
this was written by this is obviously written by somebody who has no clue what it was like to be a nerd in the 80s. This is sorry guys, incoming rant. First of all, yes, there is such a thing as a fake nerd girl. The fake nerd girl is the person who comes into an existing group of nerds, someone who comes into an existing hobby, someone who comes into an existing area of interest, and expects to be treated as if they are an aficionado of that area of interest, or an underdog like the rest of the nerds in that group, when she's coming from the popular end of the social spectrum, and then expects to have all of her popular girly sensibilities. Everybody kowtow to my sense of being the most important person in the group. Everybody kowtow to my sense of being too good for all of you guys.
Oh yeah, I play COD,
How dare
guys.
she? You know, and as far as I'm concerned, what I started this with was too nice. I had friends when I was in school, because like being a female nerd was, you know, there were rough moments. There were people that did shitty things to me. I'm not going to say there weren't. But for every shitty thing that was done to me, for being a nerd, every time somebody moved away from me at the lunch table, or every time I stood on the edge of the dance floor and didn't get asked, and didn't, you know, if I asked somebody to dance, they like gave me the hairy eyeball and walked away. Every single one of those things was minor compared to some of the shit that was done to the guys I hung out with. I had guys that buddies in my group that were people tried to run them down with cars. And I'm not kidding. They chased them through an alley, and the only reason the guys got away was because they went down another alley that was too narrow for the car to go through. I had buddies that you hear of wedgies and swirlies and stuff like that, but I had buddies that came out of the bathroom missing teeth. And I had buddies that were accused of things they didn't do because they stood too close to the wrong popular girl. And the idea that these things don't matter because we're all nerds now, and that the people that are saying this are not doing exactly the same thing by coming into nerd culture and geek culture and calling those guys toxic for not trusting them. It's so infuriating. How dare you? How dare you come into this group of people who has been shit on for 40 years and tell them for responding to being shit on and for not suddenly worshiping you because you walked in and you have tits? How dare you? What the hell is wrong with you? Do you even have any idea what this is about? It makes me want to smack the shit out of them, and I don't usually want to smack people. But just as far as I'm concerned, every chick that comes in and acts like that can fuck right the hell off. There were women in nerd culture. There were women in geek culture. There were women engineers. There were women in comics. There were women in Dungeons and Dragons. There were women in all of these things before you came along. You are not God's gift to nerds. You're not God's gift to geeks. And if you can't come in and be one of the guys, and you can't come in and joke around and engage in flirting and treat other people like they are equal to you and not beneath you, then you are a fake nerd girl. Get the fuck out.
GTFO.
I love how Hannah was saying all that right when Allison comes into the room.
Yeah.
Speaking of nerds, nerd.
Yes, somebody said that there's a super chat.
Oh yeah. It's go to the live show, and you should see Hannah posted it.
Okay, I see it. I am Allison Tiemann, and I read this message. What? That's really terrible grammar.
Maybe it's read this message.
Read this
though.
message.
Maybe
They're spelled the same way. Like wind and wind.
Try again.
I am Allison Tiemann, and I read this message.
There you go. The things people do for $10.
Have they just cast a spell on you by getting you to say that?
They cast a spell on me? Okay, I gotta go.
We've stolen your soul now, Allison.
I don't know what to say to that.
Now say...
Your hair is going to slowly turn red.
Now say, I am a false prophet. God is a superstition.
Jesus, do you really want...
No, not Jesus. God, not Jesus.
I'm not. I gotta go.
All right, go. Okay.
I was just wondering if anybody got that reference. Anybody get that reference?
No.
Ah, fuck. It's from There Will... It's what a character says from There Will Be Blood.
Oh, I haven't seen that in a long time. Like years. I just know the milkshake bit. Okay, so...
the one that brings all the boys to the yard?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So, I don't know. Who here has seen Stranger Things? Max, did you see it?
Nah, man.
Okay, so
I don't watch a lot of TV.
No, I get you. I'm the only one who watched it then. That's in this room. But I want to... okay, so mostly she uses Stranger Things as like a way to launch into a thing about, how essentially the show is made with nostalgia in mind. It takes place in the 80s, like 1984 or something like that, and it makes a lot of references to 80s stuff in it. Even the storytelling and some of the subject matter of the stories is like taken from the 80s, like whether you're taking from the kinds of teenage, like romance stories like Pretty in Pink or Breakfast Club or whatever, or whether you're taking from stuff like Gremlins, or if you're taking from horror movies or Ghostbusters or whatever. It borrows from everywhere. And I would say that while I like the show, I find it enjoyable, I find that it's a little bit shallow and empty. It's just a nostalgia-fueled machine that everyone seems to like. I mean, the author even claims that because one of the characters has an affinity for Eggo waffles, that this is going to make Eggos relevant, and Eggos are a meme. And to an extent, I think I know where they're coming from, because I think that what happens with our entertainment media a lot of the times these days is that new entertainment media that gets made almost has a goal of trying to find out, to try to make itself memeable and essentially like digestible enough that it can be spread all over the internet. So in the same way that, let's say, Doctor Who became a kind of accidental success by doing that, where people make Tumblr pages devoted to Doctor Who, and you have these Whovians, and they take little GIFs and images and shit of fucking David Tennant crying in the rain, and they put it all over the place. They want to do stuff like that with everything because they think it's another way to become really popular. So Stranger Things, I think, tries to feed into that just like many other shows do. But if you watch it, the show's fine, but it's not like, it's not breaking any new ground. In fact, it's very, very highly derivative, because that's sort of the point, because it's taking advantage of nostalgia. The weird thing is, though, is the people who tend to be the most into it weren't young in the 1980s. They weren't even born yet. So I was alive in the 80s. I was like, you know, I was around the same age these kids were from this show. I was probably 11 or 12 around the time period that this had come out. And the fact is, my experience in the 1980s, like the actual 1980s, doesn't reflect theirs. Their experience in the 1980s is more like their experience in the 1980s if they lived in the movies and TV commercials of the 1980s. My experience in the 1980s was watching the TV commercials and movies that they would exist in. So it's not, if you don't understand what I mean, that there's a degree of separation. It's like the people don't know what life was really like, and they're just using what they consume in media to reflect it. So imagine if in like 20 or 30 years someone looked at the media that existed now and they thought that this is the way people, the way life was in 2017. Well, clearly it would leave everything out, and there would be like, you know, it would be a completely different reflection. It wouldn't reflect reality. So, because it would omit whatever, right? So that's the whole point of it, right? And then the writer of the article says that it's nostalgic, the show, for a time before nerds were toxic. I take issue with that right off the bat, which is, I think, explains where Hannah's going, because yes, they present these kids that are they're basically like these boys that have this sort of they're bros, you know, at a young age, and they play Dungeons and Dragons together in this one kid's basement, and it's like a big thing for them, right? And they basically they use it, like what they do, as a way to frame their whole little world, like their experiences at school, with their parents, with their activities, and so on. It's all based around the stuff they do together, talking on walkie-talkies, riding bikes, playing Dungeons and Dragons, doing Halloween, whatever it is. So again, that's pretty normal. Like, I mean, I did that with my guy friends too. We had our own little thing that we did together, you know, and the same thing with my siblings that would participate in that. But outside of that, though, it's there isn't a whole lot there. But the thing is that the author thinks that because they presented this sort of caricature, which you do, yeah, it's like that it's like a sanitized caricature of the 80s, exactly. But it's also clearly like got a bias slant to it too, which I don't want to go into, but there's clearly like, it's presented from a point of view. There's a lens that it's being put through. That sort of like alters reality. So if you're somebody who's thinking this is, you know, this is what the 80s were like, if you live through it and you see it, you'll know that it's not really indicative of the 1980s. You know, you'll know that it's just people who think they know what the 80s was like, and so they just put it in there. And it's very exaggerated as a result, and commercialized looking and stuff. But the thing that I strongly take issue with is this idea that that nerd culture only became toxic recently, and that in these days it was more innocent and pure because these kids are presented as likable, and you know and this is, I guess, anathema to the way people are today. But the fact is, what they are doing isn't much different from any other nerds of today. It's just that people like the author of this article, they want to be in this club, and they don't understand what it is to be in this club. So that's why they say nerds were toxic, nerd culture is toxic, but we're all nerds, including me. And how you like somehow, you know, make peace with both of those ideas at the same time. The only way you can do that is to say, well, it used to be cool, and that's the kind of stuff I want, because that's how I feel, but these guys are ruining it, and what we need are purity tests so we can determine who the real nerds are and who the fake nerds are. And they're just changing, they're just flipping the script. So you have people that we would consider fake nerds coming into nerd culture, and they have platforms, and they're able to talk about it, and then what they do is they slowly... as quickly as they're able to, they want to exclude the people who have been there the entire time and say they're the fake ones, and then these people want to co-opt it and take it over. And people might ask me, you know, because I know that we get this a lot, what does it have to do with men's issues? Well, this stuff is male-dominated. These are male-dominated spaces. You know, this kind of, the nerdy cultural stuff, whether it's because you're nerdy because you take an interest in science fiction, anime, video games, fantasy stuff, or computers, or if you're like more hands-on, like you're creative and crafty, you like to build things, you like to tinker with stuff, you want to you want to get involved with shortwave radios, all the stuff that these kids do, build models, make your own Halloween costumes, you know, I don't know, play military games, or you have an interest in tactics or D&D or whatever. I mean, if you look at the spaces, they tend to be dominated by men, okay? But in terms of the gender, they tend to be more male-dominated spaces. And when you paint those spaces that are male-dominated with the brush of toxicity to say there is a problem in these spaces that have always had mostly men in them, and oh, by the way, generally women are welcome in those spaces, but generally women don't have an interest in them. And one of the reasons was, for many, many years, is it wasn't socially, it didn't give you a lot of social credit to be a part of these sorts of groups, because you were kind of an outcast. If you were like that guy that was into Dungeons and Dragons, or that liked to, you know, play Warhammer or something, or you were really into video games, when video games were young, because I remember the days of like the Atari 2600 and like the 8-bit Nintendo and stuff, those were... You couldn't go up to people in high school and meet them and say, yeah, I do this stuff. You know, it wasn't going to give you any points. You had to be, you had to somehow fit in with them. And you had to find people that, you know, had those interests, but also kept it secret. It's like being a nerd was kind of like being in the closet. And you had to find people that were like-minded if you wanted to make friends that you could share this stuff with. And then it was like you guys immediately bonded. And that was how it was back then. So it was like being in like a marginalized group, except these guys didn't generally cry victim over it. They didn't turn it into a political football. They just wanted to find people that liked what they liked. And so you have now that these industries, the video game industry, the science fiction movies, these superhero movies, comic book stuff, all of this, it's all becoming like gigantic multi-billion-dollar industries that are completely like not only socially acceptable, but they're a part of our mainstream pop culture. Well, now everyone wants to be a part of it. Now everybody knows, you know, wants to talk about the Avengers, or they want to talk about, you know, like the Star Wars stuff, or they want to get involved with D&D, or they want to play, you know, Undertale or Cuphead or whatever. They all want to be a part of all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, the people who have always been there, that helped build these industries up, that spent their money on it, that spent their time on it, that got really passionate about it. Some of them actually got involved in it, you know, professionally. They went to school about it, to learn about it, and they started jobs there in the industry, and they built it up. Well, they're the ones that are being plastered with these negative labels. They're the ones that are being told that now you have to conform your culture that you've built and this entire industry around our sensibilities, even though we only took an interest when we thought it was socially safe to do so, you know, and that we could leave at any moment if it loses our interest, or if it stops making money, because these things rise and fall, they ebb and flow, as it were, wax and wane. And we're only going to stick around for as long as it's popular. And so, and then if it's not, we'll just leave, and we'll go back to calling you guys nerds and losers and shit again. You know? And so when I see stuff like this article, I think this is how it relates to men's issues, because this is the stuff that boys like to do. I don't see anything in like, you know, in these sort of women's spaces where there are men that are pushing themselves into it, even if it does become a big industry. And then they're also, you know, asking the women that have always been there and always built it up to change it for their sensibilities and alter everything. They just, typically we just leave each other to each other's devices and their passions. But for some reason, when it comes to stuff that men like to do, there's always people that want to intrude on it and judge it and, you know, go into it with a either a surgical knife or a fucking sledgehammer to find ways to undermine it and criticize it. And that's just what I want to say about this in general. As far as like, there are some specific details about the show that there's one I really want to point out. They talk about Max, this female character they added in the second season. She was a young girl they added. She was like about the same age as the boys from the show. And she shows up and she's better than them at Dig Dug right off the bat. Like, so Dig Dug is this old arcade game and Max is just better than they are at it. So they become interested in her because she has nerdy qualities, you know, like they think, oh, she's cool because she's better than us at this video game. And a couple of them become kind of smitten and they develop a crush on her, right? And it's interesting because they do so, but it comes from a place of merit per se, you know, like right off the bat. It's because she's good at this thing and we like that about her. And then the writers try to bring Max into the group, but they do it slowly. And one of the things that they do is she does actually, she does kind of fake geek curl her way in there because one of the boys that's sort of like I wouldn't say he's the leader, but he's one of the main characters, Mike. He's the guy who's their dungeon master who plays D&D with them. And they all like they consider each of the other members to be members of a party, you know, so they have their roles or whatever. It's sort of like how they bond, I suppose. Max doesn't know anything about D&D. So she, in order to sort of force her way into the group, she basically says, why don't you just call me a Zoomer? And she doesn't even know what that means. And she basically just wants to be a part of the group. And he's like, I don't even know what that is. Like, you know, basically saying, it doesn't belong. You're not one of us. And part of it is also because he's guarded in general because he's protective of his friends. And here's this person who just wants to be a part of their group. And so he's protective and he thinks that she has to earn her way in. But she doesn't want to do that. She just wants to be included. And when she doesn't feel included, she gets butthurt right off the bat. And the thing is, when I observe that, I think, well, that seems to be pretty normal for kids of that age. And why not? Like, I don't know her. They just introduced us to her and they want us to just love her all of a sudden. Maybe she should earn our affection as the audience too. You know, I see no reason to do that. But the writer here calls it fake geek girling her and also calls it, you know, claims that Mike is being a gatekeeper. Well, I'm sorry, but, you know, when you have a circle of friends that have been together for however long they have been, then that sort of stuff is going to happen. I don't think that that's abnormal. And it certainly isn't wrong. So I just had to touch on that because the writer seems to be overly invested in the fact that there is a woman a girl who wants to be a part of a group that she insults, by the way, from the moment they meet her. She insults them constantly and basically calls them losers and rolls her eyes at them and everything else because they're kind of awkward, but then wants to be a part of them and then expects to be like immediately in you know, given the membership card. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, for her it does, I guess. I could see that. But for the writer of this article to like defend her and think, oh, she didn't do nothing wrong, I think that's beyond the pale.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about that are actually kind of sick, and it's the way that social justice types insinuate themselves into nerd and geek areas of interest, and then turn around and treat everybody there like dirt. And they hate cultural appropriation until they decide they want to do it. Mm-hmm. You know, and this is, in the barest sense of how they have described the term, cultural appropriation. And to be honest, they've never stopped nerd shaming. They've never stopped geek shaming. They're just using different language for it. You know, toxic masculinity, neckbeards, basement dwellers, whatever they want to call people who they decide are not fitting for association with them in this area of interest that they're going into that has been inhabited by the people that they have looked down on their whole lives. And they want to come into these areas of interest and co-opt the area of interest and take control of the area of interest and get credit for being a part of the area of interest in terms of social interaction and in terms of whatever it means to their career and so on, while still shaming and stepping on the people that were a part of it before them. They basically want what has become popular about these interests, not the entire interest, not the work, not the effort, not the, but what has become popular, but not if it means mingling with those nasty, unpopular, bottom rung and below nerds and geeks. And the thing is, a lot of these women, one of the reasons that they don't fit in is that they do not understand what the girls that have hung out with these groups all of their lives and been part of these groups all of their lives understand. And not all of them understand it consciously. Like I wouldn't have been able to articulate it until I wrote about it in the wake of the initial explosion of Gamergate. And that is on the social ladder, like you think of the bottom rung of the social ladder as the nerds and geeks, but that's not true. Women that would be considered a part of nerd and geek interests that were there before the social justice invasion, that were they were there because they wanted to make things, or they were there because they liked to play D&D. They were there because they liked the challenge. They were there maybe because they were socially awkward. That was part of the reason why I was there. They were there because they found it interesting to sit and read from the encyclopedia. For whatever reason, girls that have always been nerds or girls that have always been geeks, they occupy about 2 rungs up from the very bottom 2 rungs of the social ladder. And then below them are 2 rungs of guys that are part of the social ladder. And then below that is the pit. I used to think of it as ground level, but to be honest, it's not even that. There are guys who like the guys on the social ladder are nicer to them. The guys on the social ladder treat them like human beings. But there are guys that when women run into them, they treat them like absolute animals, or worse, like they don't exist at all. Not just not human. Girls that the guy walks into the store that they're working at will flee instead of waiting on him. Run away from the cash register, and the girl that can't get away fast enough is the one that actually has to ring him up. And I think the gals that come into areas of interest that have traditionally gotten you labeled nerd or geek and made fun of and picked on and treated like dirt, they've never given these guys a second thought other than how can I exploit calling him a creep to get attention. That's as close as they've actually thought of paying attention to these guys. And they come into these areas of interest and they see that these guys are part of these areas of interest, and they're not just socially awkward. Maybe they don't have good hygiene, or maybe they need their adenoids operated on and they sound horrible when they breathe, or maybe they just can't get rid of their acne on top of being socially awkward and dressing out of fashion and maybe obsessively talking about their particular area of interest, which happens to be something that other people don't even always understand. And they don't just shit on them. They dehumanize them. They abuse them. And then they get upset when they get rejected for that. And they don't understand, I think. They don't understand what cultural rules they are breaking. They don't understand that at the bottom of the totem pole and the last few rungs on the social ladder, that we all know what it's like to be shit on. And just because somebody is at that pit level doesn't necessarily mean we're going to push them out of the group. That's just the way that guy is. Mm-hmm. We hang out with him. We enjoy gaming with him. We talk to him, and we can have good conversations with him. You treat him like a human being because he still is one. And for God's sake, you know, if you can help him fit in, or you can at least help him navigate social situations, you do. And you don't treat him like dirt under your feet. You don't treat him like shit. You don't abuse him. And I don't think these social justice types are going to get that. And they think of themselves as caring and loving, considerate, compassionate people who are not prejudiced against other people and who are warriors against bigotry and prejudice. But for them to come into that situation and not take the time to observe, not take the time to get to know each other, and to automatically start establishing pecking order, which they do, and to start finding the guys in the social pit below the social ladder and shitting on them and abusing them, it demonstrates very clearly that they are the exact polar opposite of what they are. And it demonstrates why they will never be what it means to be a nerd. And they will never be what it means to be a geek. Because it's not just having that area of interest. It's also having enough compassion and enough understanding for your fellow human being to not take a person like that and say, well, except you. You don't count. You're not human. Get away from me. Shame on you for being here.
All right, a couple more super chats I got to go through. French Honey Badger gave us $2 and writes, I think that's enough ease. Silent Mana gave us $5 and says, these people are no more nerds than I am a marmoset. And Hoki Bukisa gave us $350, about $350, and said, quote, before nerds were toxic, end quote, get That's as far as it got. I'm pretty sure he just ran out of characters, but I don't know what else he wanted to say. One other thing I wanted to speak to, because I was looking at the chat while you were talking, and this is sort of specific to the show, so for people who didn't watch, you're about to get lost here, but someone was talking about the Max character, which is this girl and joins the group, and telling us that she was kind of messed up, right? Because she came from what appeared to be an abusive family. They kind of like give you some background on her as you watch through the season. So the story goes that Max is kind of abusive to these kids because she herself is abused by her stepbrother, who is the guy who drives her to school and picks her up. And he is abusive verbally and physically sometimes to her because they needed a new antagonist since the one from the last season was reformed. So they basically just crank it up, and they have this like mullet blonde, douchebag guy that like listens to punk music and drives a fast car and all that. And he, picks on her and insults her and stuff. He also apparently is racist because he doesn't want her hanging around with the black kid. So, they really go, he's a bit cartoonish, to be honest. And some of it doesn't make sense, and I'll explain what it is. I think some of the stuff that stood out for me was really weird. They actually fled here from California. So you're telling me that the blonde mullet surfer guy from California is a racist, which I find it a little bit hard to believe that California would be portrayed that way. But okay, I'll give it to you. And then they are there because the father and his father and her stepfather was divorced from her biological mother and his stepmom, or his stepmom, because he has a different mom, she has a different dad or whatever, I think. And somehow the stepfather got custody of the kids and went to California. That's another bit of a red flag. There are not many cases where the guy gets the kids and then goes to California. And then on top of that, the stepfather is the father, as it were. He's the abusive one. So you learn near the end of the season that the blonde mullet villain kid who's abusive to Max is only abusive to Max because his father is abusive to him. And his father is abusive to him because he's some kind of military dad or something, I think. And also have the new girlfriend of the father, who's like I guess she's either the new wife or the new girlfriend, I can't remember exactly. And she's looking on helplessly as the father abuses the son, who then in turn abuses Max. And I'll tell you why that doesn't make sense for a couple reasons. One, if he was the abusive one in the family, how the fuck did he get custody of the kids? Secondly, if he's the abusive one, why is this woman with him if she knows that's how he is? It's like this weird storytelling stuff, because they insist that if the kids come from abusive parents, the parent must be the dad. And if it is the dad, he still has to have custody, even though that's not likely to happen. And he should still be with someone else who looks on powerlessly as he abuses his kids. It doesn't actually make any sense. Now, you guys tell me what you think in the comments, but don't you think it's a little bit weird that there's a family from California in this fictional universe that has a racist son who's racist for no reason? There's nothing explained about that. And the stepdad, he's only like that because his stepdad is abusive to him, who is this abusive father, who somehow got custody of the kids in the divorce despite his abuse, and he's with someone else who chose to be with him despite the fact that he's abusive to his own kids. That doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. I'm just going to leave it at that. This is how you know the writing is a little bit sketchy, because they make some strange choices.
So it's basically a tropey feminist talking point casserole.
Yeah, without giving a lot of thought to whether or not it makes any sense. Because again, it's like they said, we need to explain why Max is the way she is. Why is she a bitch to these kids? Well, she's not a bitch. We can't have her be a bitch. That's impossible because she's a woman and we need her to look good. So what we'll do is we'll say she's a bitch, but only because her stepbrother abuses her. Okay, so the stepbrother abuses her, but now he looks a bit cartoony. So how do we fix that? Well, let me see. His parents abuse him. Which one? Well, it's got to be the dad, because moms don't do that. Never. Well, what happened? Well, they got divorced and dad got custody. The abusive dad got custody. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and then the one thing that could be realistic is a woman who stays with an abusive guy who's abusing kids that are not her kids, or even kids that are. I've run into that. In fact, the 7 Years in Hell story, I reference that again, the reason the dad in that story, in that situation, the reason that he got the custody that he got was because the child's mother did not stop the stepfather, who was not even a husband to her at the time, from abusing the child. Her boyfriend that she was living with beat the child black and blue, and her big excuse for not throwing him out of the house, for not getting her child out of that situation, was, well, he beats me too. And it was her residence. It wasn't her moving in with him. He moved in with her. So it was a situation where she could have called the cops and gotten him out of there. And nope, she kept him around. In fact, after the judge ordered this woman to, if you want custody of your child, you have to get this abuser out of your life. You cannot have the child and the abuser in the same home. Then she married him and then continued to try to get custody of the child. And the only reason that she wasn't able to use false allegations to do that was because of the significant amount of documentation that went into preventing her from putting him in a situation where he could not disprove the allegations. But it's unfortunately not unrealistic for a woman to stay with a guy that is abusing her children.
No,
a woman
that's
will
not
rationalize her way through that. That's the only realistic thing about that whole scenario you described.
Yes, except that typically when they do it, and I guess this is our fault, like a society speaking, we tend to do this. We give the woman a pass for being with him, despite the fact that she knows he's abusive and doesn't do anything about it. We say, well, she couldn't do anything about it. She was scared or whatever. We hold them to a low standard. So the way they're painting her, I mean, even though I don't even know her name, she was just shown really briefly, but I think they're setting this character up for another season. They present her as though she's like this powerless person that just got involved with this guy and thought he was nice, and all of a sudden he just started beating his kids, and she just watches like, oh my god, I didn't know this was how he was. I just thought he was really assertive and shit. You know, and they're not, I have a feeling they're not gonna, like, you know, realize that she should maybe, you know, take some accountability or some responsibility for the way that she chooses men, if this is the kind of person he is. But I don't see that happening. So.
No, I imagine they won't write that into the show, but they also won't write what really happens into the show either. It'll be that she's scared, or it'll be that she, you know, doesn't understand what's going on, or something along those lines. And the truth is, a lot of times it's exactly like South Park portrayed with Cartman. God, I can't think of the girlfriend's name, but with that relationship where, you know, she keeps rationalizing, I didn't, and then the bottom line is, I didn't make a bad choice. I didn't make a bad decision. I didn't make a mistake here. And it's sort of that. Well, I love this guy. I care about this guy. And I opened myself up to this guy because I decided he must be a wonderful person. And I must therefore, in my head, minimize the wrongness of every wrong thing he does. And you'll see it with women that tolerate this. And you see the same thing with men that tolerate abusive women. Oh, I know your father or your mother is rough on you, but it's because they care. It's because they want the best for you. It's because they want you to grow up to be responsible and accountable. Heidi, there we go. And with Cartman and Heidi, it's always really good to me when we're not alone, or when we're alone, you know, and stuff like that. And the relationship to the ego of the behavior that it ends up, you know, where you come out and excuse the other partner's relationship. It's not a loose relationship. It's your ego talking. It's your self-esteem talking. Oh, I can't feel bad about having made this choice, you know, and it really ends up being a situation where the partner that stays with the abuser, who is abusive towards the kid verbally or physically, will rationalize the abuse as tough discipline, with the goal of ensuring that the kids develop the tools they need as adults to succeed in life. And it's awful, but it is one of the reasons that people stay with abusive partners. And to turn around and say, oh, they were scared, oh, they couldn't get out, oh, they were trapped, oh, you know, the society didn't help them, and society pushed them into this situation, and so on. No, it's really, it comes from inside.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna go on ahead and go on to the last story, but you guys give me your thoughts on if you watch Stranger Things, because it was very popular, everybody was watching it. This is why I chose the story, and obviously I found that when I saw that BuzzFeed was going to try to use this to nerds, which basically, you know, whenever they get a chance, these websites are going to use anything in pop culture, because for some reason this is how they breathe their air to attack their outgroup, what they think as the, you know, the majority, and it's usually men in most of these cases. So last story. Speaking of another Gamergate related, say culture war related story, Cuphead. So for those of you guys who never played the game or don't know anything about it, I apologize. I'll try to briefly explain, but first I'll read the piece here. A comparison too far. Since its release earlier this year, Cuphead has been called everything from ableist to white supremacist. No, seriously, it has. The humble 2D platformer was an old-school animation aesthetic, often referred to in jest as the Dark Souls of platformers, finds itself being attacked yet again for its unique look. It's no secret that Cuphead's signature style is directly inspired by early Disney and Fleischer animation. Some have attacked the borrowing of that style for the source's historically racist depictions of minorities. This is a strange argument to make, as Cuphead itself lacks any racist depictions or portrayals of minorities seen in older Fleischer and Disney animation. I mean, frankly, in Cuphead, there's like almost no human beings at all. Everything is animated, anthropomorphized objects or animals. Maja Moldenhauer, lead inking artist for Cupheads, states, quote, "It's just visuals and that's about it. anything else happening in that era we're not versed in. This hasn't stopped the previous group from claiming that by leaving out those racialized depictions, Cuphead is sanitizing and whitewashing history. It seems there's no way to win with these people or please them. Ultimately, Cuphead is one of the least offensive games ever made, and whatever hidden messages or racist comparisons one may draw says much more about the individual making the connections than it does about the game itself. So basically, the person who wrote this article, named Yusuf Cole, he basically wrote an article entitled Cuphead and the Racist Spectre of Fleischer Animation. And he's basically talking about, because Cuphead has this old school Disney Fleischer Studios sort of Popeye 1930s style animation style, that because around those time periods they would also do racialized stereotypes that I used to, as a kid, me and my friends, most of whom were black, we found that shit hilarious. But I know
game ever. I mean, sure, it's difficult, but aside from that, like, what it could possibly be offensive about it? It's just, it takes you back to a time where life seems simpler. You know, when you were young and you watched the animated cartoons that had these particular animation styles, you know, Song of the South, not, you know,
oh, yeah.
Put that out of your mind. Yeah. But, you know, it's just, I don't fucking get it. Why is everybody piling on this particular game? I think it's because it's popular and high profile. I think that with these, you gotta tear that shit down.
Yeah, with these people, it's like they gotta tear shit down, but also they gotta get clicks. So they're, you know, there's definitely more offensive games out there that they could easily be writing about that would get them a lot less attention. But this one is like, because the thing is, like, and that's the funny thing, is that this is a success story in a lot of ways. The developers that made this is like, I think this is their first game, and they've never done this before. They did a Kickstarter, you know, to get it started up. It's definitely an indie title, and it took them 4 years to make because it's all hand-drawn animation, you know, and they nailed it. I mean, I have it, and they fucking nailed it, okay? And yes, they did a really good job, and I'm sorry, but it's a stretch to find anything offensive about it. A real stretch. The only thing I guess you could do is, and I'm surprised they haven't done it yet, but I guess the one thing they haven't done is complain that you can't play as a female character on the game. And I'm just waiting for that article. I'm sure it exists, or it's coming. Because they're you know, that's the only thing that they can possibly do that I could even say, yes, technically you're right, there are no female characters. However, the main character is a cup with a body and legs. There are no men like that either. I don't feel like I'm being represented in this game. So, but it's just, you know, I don't know. I guess if you live the way these people do, and I mean these people like in the, you know, being kind of a, I don't know, games journalist, social justice warrior type. Like, it's a mindset. It's an ideological mindset. You have to live in a world where everything you look at, you have to try to find how it's oppressing you by existing.
Oh
and
my
maybe,
God. And that's the thing that pisses me off the most about most journalists in the entertainment, well, not most, but a significant amount of entertainment journalists out there, whether you're talking about video games or movies, you know, this is the thing. I am heavily involved within the sphere of movies, less so games, but still notably enough. And there's tons of journalists out there that I do respect. But sometimes these same journalists, they'll do these columns, these lengthy columns about, like, for example, you know, Star Wars, The Force Awakens, when that movie came out, right? I remember in every single publication, there was something to the extent of, oh, what does Rey symbolize for the feminist movement in 2015? Oh, Rey was too feminist. She was too... I'm just like, shut up! Just shut up! It's a fucking piece of art. It's a game. It's a movie. And there's nothing that pisses me off that when people say, oh, well, this piece of art should have been this particular way, right?
Yeah.
Then you don't understand art. Not at all, okay?
No.
What art is you're just on the outside looking in at what somebody else is producing, and then you just go along in the story with them, okay? You're not supposed to say, oh, well, this particular piece of art should have been constructed to further the proper, appropriate socially political agendas, you know, to make sure that we're on the right track towards a utopian future. No, it's a fucking game. It's a movie. It's music. It's a book. Shut the fuck up or make your own. And that's the thing. These people, the people in this particular community, whenever they try to make anything of their own, it saddens me to say this, but it's actually true. The best they can do is something where they make a Twine game, right? Where it's just a choose your own adventure novel, but you can interact with it.
Are you talking about like the Telltale things?
No. Telltale is actually good.
Basically, an interactive story where you click to go to the next thing, and
like Depression Quest.
Yeah, right.
Irritating as hell. Get out.
No thanks.
I have to wonder. So you said it was an indie game that was crowdsourced.
Yeah, they crowdsourced it. They funded themselves. They worked on it for 4 years. We're looking at meritocracy, like ground up, like from nothing to something. You know.
See, I think that's probably part of the reason why it was attacked. And you look at this. Could it be that it's being established or being attacked by establishment games journos because it's not part of the approved games establishment? Because one of the things we learned.
Wait, one second. I just want to tell people in the chat that are having trouble watching this because they might not hear you. Go to Twitch. The Twitch is way stabler right now. Go to Twitch if you're having trouble. Okay, Hannah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's just one of the things that we learned. During the Gamergate controversy was that there was this this massive collusion among not just games journalists and social justice types, but games journalists and preferred game developers, game companies, and of course that even extended into the types of contests. And I'm not one that follows the contests and everything, but both the competitive gaming type contests and competition for awards for creating great games. So essentially, the Oscars and Emmys of the games world. And I'm wondering if part of the reason that this is being attacked so viciously is it's not part of the in crowd in that group of that area of collusion, because I'm pretty sure that didn't go away. And of course, the other thing is, okay, so if having an historical connection to racism, say something about it in the past was racist, something they did related to it in the past was racist, a part of it was racist, or whatever, and that makes the modern incarnation of it, even though that stuff is not included in the modern incarnation, that makes that racist too. Well, I just hope that the person that wrote this doesn't wear blue jeans and t-shirts or anything else that's made out of cotton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yusuf Cole.
By the way, I just wanted to apologize for screaming before.
Man.
This sort of thing gets me really pissed off because, like Brian, I'm sure you understand. Like,
I get it.
And Anna, of course, like
it's a high energy response. High energy. That's good. You brought the energy tonight.
When you take art and you understand what art is and how much of a person's entire being, how their soul, their spirit is entirely interwoven with that, and how you totally invalidate it because you don't have the same political viewpoints. It's such an undermining of the entire artist. I'm sounding like such a hippie right now, but you know what I mean.
I hear you. You know what? No, this is one of the reasons why I choose articles like this, because as an artist myself, and how I found myself on Honey Badger Radio was because I was trying to create something, and there were people telling me that I should do it a different way. And I was like, you're telling me what I should do with my own creative abilities. Fuck off. Like I would never tell anyone what, even the feminists that make fucking, vagina art and they bleed on canvases and all that crazy shit. I would never tell them, where to stick that Campbell's soup can. I would never tell them that they can't do that. I would never tell them to. I would say that, what, I don't understand what you're making and I think it's shitty. And I think that, that it's like really awful art, but I'm never going to tell you that you can't do it. I'm never going to tell you to change it. You know,
Same thing with David Lynch. You know, I think Mulholland Drive, fantastic movie, but I think you need some fucking therapy, dog. Just saying.
No, I will say, you come into my D&D gaming and tell the guys there that they're shameful people for not catering to your sensibilities, then I will tell you where to stick that Campbell's soup can and everything you brought with you. But yeah. No, you don't necessarily tell people how to do their art. You can make fun of it though if you think it's stupid. There's nothing wrong with that. But for Pete's sake, have at least somewhat consistent standards. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're gonna say it's evil to use an art form that people used to express ideas that you're going to call racist, or that when the art form was created, it was pretty much standard to stereotype everybody, and you're only going to take issue with the stereotypes of minorities that are the most benefit from they get the most benefit from the progressive stack. Then you also have to take everything else in your life that has a history that you would object to the relationship between that history and those minorities. You got to exclude all that stuff from your life. You can't say, well, it's bad in this instance, but when I do it, it's okay.
Yeah. Also, guys, if you haven't seen it, you should go look at some old Popeye cartoons. The stuff was pretty funny. I find the stuff that people like are really offended by now hilarious. But I mean, because you're so far removed from it, like, you know, time-wise, it's not like you're gonna watch it and become racist. But it's so funny though, especially the World War II things that the Looney Tunes had. Holy shit! Tom and Jerry and like the old Tex Avery stuff from like way back in the day when he was doing like City of Tomorrow and the stuff with the Droopy, and it just. If you haven't seen that stuff, go check it out. And
you know what's a...
Go ahead.
Sorry, just very quickly. You know what's a great movie that would never, ever be made today that's so quotable and so entertaining?
Blazing Saddles. Blazing Saddles.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, no, that would never
Brian,
happen.
you and I are just like this. You know, we're just like Merle Bridge from Pacific Rim.
That's definitely one of them for sure. There's that. And you know what? It's actually, well, you know, that's a whole other thing. But I would say that despite the fact that Blazing Saddles can be made today, the funny thing is that it approaches the topic of race better than movies that are made today do. It does. It really does. It does it very well. So, Hannah, did you want to? I know you were about to say something, but did you want to say something else? Or?
Well, no, I was just speaking up in agreement with that.
Oh yeah, Blazing Saddles.
I could say Goldie Hawn wouldn't have had her career. If it started today, if she was a teenager today, and she wouldn't have been a go-go dancer, because I don't think there might still be go-go dancers, but today she would probably just have been a stripper, but she wouldn't have the career. Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In never would have happened today, and that's where she got her start, and she got her start portraying the dumb blonde. In the most dryly sarcastic manner possible sometimes. And it was great. And you can't do that if you're not very smart, and people recognize that. But today, people would be like, oh, she's perpetuating damaging stereotypes. Yeah. That has to stop.
Oh, yeah. Tons of those things would be like that. You wouldn't be able to do Airplane today.
Well, and the stupid thing is, out of all of these women in Hollywood that are coming out with allegations, like you look at the various women that have done things in Hollywood, Goldie Hawn had a remarkable career throughout that. I mean, she's still doing it, you know. So, and all this, you know, women can't do this, women can't do that, women were discriminated against, women had these problems, women had those problems. She managed to navigate it. You know, I think she pretty much did what my aunt used to say as her unique way of describing having a take charge attitude was stick your tits out and walk in like you own the place. And I took that to heart to a degree. I didn't have the tits to do it, but that taking of confidence, if you don't have it, you're going to take a confident attitude anyway. And if you can't find somebody to bolster you. You have to bolster yourself. I see that in Goldie Hawn's career. And I see feminists today telling women, you can't do that. And it's to perpetuate damaging stereotypes like that, you have to be afraid. You can't obtain your own confidence. You can't make your own way. And you sure as shit can't use humor that we don't like. You know, that's just sad, because you look at things like Blazing Saddles, things like Mel Brooks's entire career wouldn't have happened. And women like Goldie Hawn never would have had their types of careers. That would be a huge loss to society, not just in terms of what they created and the value of that humor and the value of the content that came out of it, but also the value to the individuals who do those things. You know, that if we can't make our own way and we can't stick our tits out and walk in like we own the place, when we're not feeling 100% confident because nobody else is bolstering us, then we can't have that degree of success. Not without basically relying on the casting couch. So as far as I'm concerned, the social justice bullshit, that pushes people into situations like what came out of all of the Harvey Weinstein accusations.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, so I guess we're good. We did all the stories, and it's time to go into the after show stuff. So a couple things before we leave. I'm going to take another quick look to see if there's any super chats that I haven't read yet, because I know that I tend to forget. All right, so Polaris589 gives us $5 and says, Cuphead isn't Dark Souls, it's Contra, without the Contra code.
Indeed.
I added that at last bit on, though he didn't write that, but I think that's what he wanted to say. And thank you for the $5, Polaris. Ryan Field gives us $5. Thank you, Ryan, and says, other things with stylistic similarities were racist, therefore you and all of your fans are the bad thing. Yes, that's right. It's just retarded. It's just really retarded. And then on Twitch, because I'm looking at that too, someone here, let me see. Click Denny says, Brian, tell your users they can subscribe to Twitch for free if they have an Amazon Prime account. It might be worth, I'm assuming he means to say it might be worth it. Yeah, the Twitch seems to be a lot stabler than the YouTubes, guys. So I'm not saying abandon the YouTubes, because we like our YouTube people, but it might be a good idea to have Twitch accounts. I don't know that it even costs anything to sign up. I don't know. But it might be worth it to have a Twitch account in case YouTube continues on this path. And Twitch is a viable platform. You know, we have the notifications that pop up on the screen when people subscribe to us. So please consider joining us on Twitch, even if you're already with us on YouTube. Fuck it. Do both. Let's build a Twitch platform together. Meanwhile, I'm going to be taking us out, but I thought I would show you guys what we're going to be looking at in the after show. So in the after show, we have this article from Jezebel. We don't do Jezebel very often, but I wanted to go through this one because I thought it was interesting. It's called I Suck, How Guys Use Self-Deprecation Against You. That's right. Being confident is bad because sexism. Being a spineless, self-hating man is also bad because manipulation. So let's see how much projection is in this bullshit in the after show. And then, if there's time, we'll also go through one other post. This is a long post written on Ellen Page, that's the movie actress, on Ellen Page's Facebook page. It's just a long post related to all this Harvey Weinstein shit. I think it starts off with, you should fuck her to make her realize she's gay. He said this about me during a cast and crew meet and greet before we began filming X-Men The Last Stand. I was 18 years old. So this could be dramatic and fun to look at. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and take everyone out. So I would like to thank you guys for joining us on the Polecat this week. I also wanted to thank the people who helped write up the story summaries. That is the Stapler, as well as Mike J, and oh crap, I forget who else it is. I always forget people's names. I'm sorry, guys. Andrew.
Hello.
And Max. That's right, Max. Yes, Max and Andrew and Mike, Jay, and the Stapler. So I want to thank you guys for helping me out with that. And I especially want to thank my co-hosts, Mike, Hannah, Max, and myself, for taking time to come out and going through these cancerous articles and discussing them. If you guys would like, I would really appreciate if you guys engage in a great discussion about all the topics we discussed on the comment section below, either here or wherever you might be. We look at the Facebook, the Twitch, and the YouTube stuff. So, until next time, this is the Polecat Cast or HBR News signing out, and we will see you very